I think we're on, Meredith.
Great. Yate Shikis. My name is Meredith Lamb. I am the Title VI coordinator for Provo City School District. Just a really quick introduction of what Title VI is. I know that for those of you who are joining tonight, I know I have been doing a lot of presentations in a lot of the different schools and a lot of different classes. So I had a lot of families and students tell me that they were going to be tuning in tonight. And I don't have a chance really when I'm doing those presentations to really tell everybody exactly what we do for Title VI. And Title VI is actually a federal program. I'm sure you're more familiar with programs like Title I and Title III. Title VI falls under the Department of Education. So it is under the U.S. Department of Education out of the Office of Indian Education. And it is a program that has been facilitated in the 70s to basically reassure and make sure that Native American children in the school system are keeping their culture alive and that they are receiving support, cultural support in the school system. The reason why is because, and I've kind of touched on this, I know with some of the presentations I've been doing over the last month, it was US federal policy at one point when Native Americans were moved off into reservations. There was a federal policy that was kill the Indian, save the man. And I know that sounds really terrible, and it is what it sounds like. It was a forced assimilation process. And what that meant was when Native children were stolen from their homes and their families to go into boarding schools at the hands of the US government, they were forced to not speak their language. They had to cut their hair. Just some really horrible, traumatic experiences that children experienced during the forced assimilation policy. And the US government obviously is embarrassed about this policy. I know that history has been trying to not wipe out, but I think when something bad happens in history, I think people try to make things better. And so this was a step of why the Office of Indian Education was created under the US Department of Ed. And so Title VI was born, and it has been a long-standing program. It's had different names over the years. Title IX, Title VI is what it currently is. I know it was Title VII at one point. But the whole point of the program is to keep Native American children in touch with their culture in the public school educational system. And so they hire people like myself, who are the Native American education directors, and they are directors that are also in Alaska, the Alaska Native Title VI programs, where they also do have directors as well. Hawaii, in the state of Hawaii, they do utilize Title VI for Native Hawaiian education. And in Hawaii, those programs are usually for Native Hawaiian students. And they also would include Native American and Alaska Native students who are attending, maybe living in Hawaii, going and attending school. So this entire program was supported through the US Department of Education. It's not a fix-all program. It's not a program that has all the answers, but there have been some recent statistics as far as the benefits of having a Title VI program. And I know that for our school district, we have had a 100% graduation rate for the last 3 years. And so is the program working? Possibly. I know that COVID definitely has affected that, because that was our reach out was to have in-person programs, and a lot of our programs for Title VI are extracurricular, and then we move into summer programs as well. But the whole point of the program is to facilitate and to help encourage Native American students to take part and to have part in their culture or contact with their cultural heritage or languages. And so for the school district in Provo, if students are Navajo, they are encouraged and supported through Navajo language classes through the Utah State Board of Education. and they fulfill a prerequisite to apply for Navajo Nation scholarships. There are no other language programs right now, and I think the reason why Navajo language is such a dominant language, native language in this specific area is because it's pretty much a large tribe in the southwestern area, and there are a lot of Navajo students. There are many other tribes, though, that do have their languages, and it will be neat. And I do hear of language programs that are facilitated through Title VI in the Pacific Northwest areas. You get some wonderful language programs in the Oklahoma area, areas where there are large populations of Native American students in public school systems. And so there's a lot of great facilities, there's a lot of great resources that are brought in through Title VI. And so the whole point of it is when I talk to my students, my hope for the program is I want my students to succeed. And in order to do that, I let them know that your cultural heritage, your language is going to be something that will last forever throughout your life. And so it's important to keep it with you. And you should not be expected to shed your cultural skin when you walk through the school doors. That's something that should be kept with you. It's something that you should be supported through teachers, through faculty, through administration. It's something that we encourage. And it breaks my heart to hear of stories where students are made fun of for wearing their hair long, or graduation ceremonies where students aren't supported through their districts to wear, their eagle feathers, which is a big milestone for Native American students. And we receive the eagle feather as an accomplishment and a milestone, but we wear those eagle feathers with pride. And so it's hard to hear of instances where this does happen. Our district has had our superintendent completely clear and say that he is supportive of students wearing their traditional regalia under the gown, and the eagle feather is something that is permitted. And as far as, Native American Heritage Month, the children in the district also have a day where they can dress up in their traditional attire or regalia, and they can wear that to school. And it really is a talking point. This week, for example, is Rock Your Mocks Week. And so for those of you who are tuning in and that are students in the district, you may see your Native American fellow students wearing different shoes this week. And if you have the chance, ask them about it. If you're a teacher and you see a student wearing their traditional moccasins, ask them about it. We love to have questions and we love to educate. That's the whole point of us facilitating our culture in the spaces of where we go to school, where we go to work. We are proud of that heritage. We are proud of who we are, and never feel embarrassed about asking a student about what they're wearing. It's a talking point for us, and it's something that we do want to facilitate, but also just remember to be respectful in asking those questions, always respectful towards the students. And I feel like people have been really respectful in the questions that they ask. I'm loving going around to different classrooms and seeing different teachers and different students and talking to them, because they've truly been, I wouldn't say fascinated, but they love Native American culture. And they love, I think one of the lesson plans that we've been doing is the round dance and the hoop dance. And so there's just so much that goes into these lesson plans that it's been fun to see the kids being interactive and asking questions and learning about Native Americans in the state of Utah, because even though we have their curriculum in fourth grade, that is not enough to teach them. And so it's a really great opportunity as an administrator for me and for my families that are Native American in the district to get out and to be part of the community and to teach. And so we've been grateful for those opportunities. But tonight we have a wonderful administrator, Brian Yazzie, who is going to be speaking and asking questions and being our moderator for the panel discussion, where he will be talking to Jacob Crane and Aaron Tapahe. Brian is our diversity and equity director here in Provo City School District. And I have just had the honor of working with Brian over these last few years. It's been a real pleasure. Brian is Dana and Hopi. I introduced you myself and I said hello in Navajo, and I am also Dana. So it's been nice to have a fellow Arizonan, in the workspace with me. And it's been just an honor and pleasure to work with Brian. And I will go ahead and turn the time over to Brian to start the panel discussion.
All right. Well, thanks, Meredith. And yes, Yate and Lolama. As Meredith said, I'm a Navajo and Hopi from a little community called Lower Greasewood, which is on the southern part of the Navajo reservation. But I grew up in a small little 5,000 populated community called Holbrook, which is 90 miles east of Flagstaff. So that's where I'm from. And on the Hopi side, I'm from the village of Hotvela, which is on the third mesa. So that's where my family originated. So it's a pleasure to be here with you all this evening. So these speaker series events are part of what we've been doing from our Diversity and Equity Office with the Provo City School District. We want to highlight and celebrate the cultures that we have here in our amazing district and in our community. And so we've taken the opportunity of inviting guests to join us and share a little bit of their story, their perspective, their background, to educate all of us about just different people and celebrate people as we are all brothers and sisters here in this world. And so as we navigate together, it's good that we can come and learn from each other. So I'm really excited about this evening. This is part of our Native American Heritage Celebration, and nothing warms my heart more than to be able to talk to our young people. I spent almost 30 years of my professional career working with Native youth from across the country, and when I see them grow up and do some amazing things in life, it warms my heart. And so tonight we get to hear two amazing young people that went to school here, Provo City School District, and attended Timpview High School. And so we're going to kind of hear their story and learn from them this evening. So let's start off with ladies first. So Miss Erin Tapahi. Why don't we start off with you? Why don't you kind of share a little bit about your background and your family, and just kind of tell everybody who you are.
Yat Erin Tapahi and Ashia Kia Anin Shlan Tachini Bashashin Tabahe Dashache Todachini Dashanella. So my name is Erin Tapahi. I am Dana. My family moved from Window Rock, Arizona to Provo so that my mom could continue her education at Brigham Young University. She has her undergrad in dietetics, and then she has her master's in business management. And so that's why we're here in Provo, Utah. And that's why me and my sister were part of the Provo School District. I graduated from Timpview High School. I am currently I'm a reporter for Tribal Business News, which is an online news organization, and we cover any and everything business related within Indian country. I think I keep myself a little too busy because there are a lot of projects that I'm working with, like Art Hill's The Jingle Dress Project. There's a few other things that are kind of in the works. And so it's been really fun. And so that's kind of a little bit of background about me. And I think the real reason why I chose journalism and writing is because I want to be a voice for the good and successful things within our Native communities. And I think that sometimes large mainstream media has a tendency of not kind of highlighting that. And so that's kind of why I really wanted and sought after those opportunities to write for Tribal Business News.
That's awesome, Aaron. Thanks for being here with us. That's a skill that I wish that I had, that I could be a writer. I'm so I definitely have a lot of respect for you. So that's wonderful. So
Thank you.
thanks. Jacob Crane, we're excited to hear from you. So why don't you share a little bit of who you are?
Yeah, Zeta Sada, Sister Jacob Crane. Hello, everyone. My name is Jacob Crane. I'm from Tsuut'ina Nation, located on Treaty 7 territory here in so-called Alberta, Canada. But I moved to the States when I was young. My parents moved down here because they went to school as well at Brigham Young University. And so this was a place that they wanted to move to kind of take a break from the reserve. And the reserve is also known as reservations. That's what we call them here in so-called Canada. And so we left the reserve when I was about 11 years old. And so I spent a lot of time in the Provo School district there at Centennial Middle School and High School. So a little bit of background about me. I'm a diehard entrepreneur. I love Indigenous entrepreneur. I love Indigenous entrepreneurship. I love starting companies that positively impact our communities. And right now, I'm the executive director of the SLC Air Protectors, which is a environmental nonprofit based out of Salt Lake City, Utah. And so we do a lot of COVID-19 relief work there. That's what we've been doing. I've yet to touch an environmental campaign yet because we've been focused on supporting our communities within the state of Utah. So do a lot of programs there. Love what I do. Happy to be here tonight. I have 5 siblings, and I have my mom and my dad. I have a son. I have a 16-year-old little boy. So yeah, lots going on.
That's that is a lot, but you got a soft spot in my heart with nonprofit work. I love nonprofit because you're doing good things for people, and that's what I enjoy, that type of work. So, congratulations on your success to both of you, for where you're at in life right now. That's you're wonderful role models, and so I definitely have a great respect for both of you. Okay, so since you've shared a little bit about who you are, so let's talk a little bit about now. You mentioned you're both graduates of Timpview High School. What was it like? Being a native youth, attending an urban school. It's a little bit different. Maybe a little bit from the experience of, let's say, you were on a reservation where you're surrounded a little bit more of culture and some of the traditions that we have as Native people. But now you're in a community, and Jacob, it's a little bit different for you too. Coming from Canada, from a different from a different country into the United States. So you've had to make that change as well. So what was the experience like, and how was that experience that help you kind of shape your foundation of who you are, and what you do now? I mean, if you can kind of help us to maybe understand that a little bit, especially maybe some of the challenges that you faced, and as well as some of the good things that has helped you, as native people, by going to school in an urban community. So, Aaron, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so as a freshman in high school, wow, that sounds so long ago. I was I got involved. I did a lot with cheerleading and soccer my freshman year. But then what I didn't really understand or anticipated was just like the largeness of high school and how because I went from like elementary school and then into middle school. We're still like I still was friends with a lot of the people that I grew up with. And so at that point it was never like being native was never like it was just kind of like, oh yeah, that's part of who she is, or like it was kind of seen as like, oh, she's left-handed. Like there wasn't much like people didn't really make much of like a big deal about it. But then when it just is like kind of a part of who I am, like, oh, Erin likes ice cream, Erin's native. It just was like one of the basic facts that we all kind of knew about me, and like we kind of all just knew that about everyone else. But then when high school came, I I just entered into a whole different realm with like lots of clicks, and then having to do all this. Like was spending a lot of time with cheer practice and having to navigate between cheer practice and soccer practice. And a lot of the time that I had, I wasn't able to spend with my friends. And so they kind of would be like, oh, Erin's busy. And then they'd kind of hang out and do their own thing. And then all of a sudden I'm like, where are the people that I spent my childhood with? And then I felt like I just was lost, because I was surrounded by so many people that I was trying to impress. It was the cheer teams. It was a lot of like trying to like be in the know, and you're always going to games and things like that. So it was really busy. And so I wasn't prepared for that. I didn't know how to stand as a Native student on my own, because I never really had to before then. And so I really had to, for me, it felt like I kind of was just kind of put my Native card aside and was trying to so hard to just deal with high school and school in general, and then all the extracurricular activities. But it wasn't until I was kind of a little bit more as like a junior. And then I started getting really involved with I think it was Title 7 when I was in school, but then now it's Title 6. I really got involved with that because I did a lot of hoop classes. I'd get the newsletters in elementary and middle school. But then because of to help prepare for the Chief Manuelito scholarship, I was doing the Navajo language and government classes to help me prepare for that scholarship for college. And so that's where I got to like get to know Meredith, and I was able to see her kids kind of grow up, and me and my sister were going to those classes together, and we had like a couple other Navajo students there as well. But it wasn't until my senior year where I really felt like, okay, like this thing isn't quite working. It seemed too exhausting to try and stay in the know and just keep up with what everyone else is doing. So I decided to not do cheer. I kind of I took a whole bunch of art classes, something that I'd never done beforehand, and I just let like the whole creativity just flow. I found out that I really liked writing, and I just made this like 180 turn. It's just completely different life choices that I had to kind of deal with difficult questions of asking myself and having to remember like what my parents and grandparents have taught me, and have to kind of make it simple instead of making it this big, like this giant, like enormous task, and just go back to just the simple things within that I was taught growing up. And then it also helped that this school had a cultural assembly, and then I got a call that was randomly from one of my elementary classmates, and she's like, "Can you hoop dance?" And I was like, "Sure." And I called Meredith, and she let me borrow her regalia, and I was able to dance. And it was me and my sister, and I think that was just a really good way to kind of end that experience at high school, was to kind of I tried really hard to do one thing and it didn't work out, and so then I just went back to my roots.
So I would say you had a self-discovery kind of your senior year, and what's interesting is your culture. You went back to kind of the basics of your culture to kind of have that self-discovery. I mean, the class, the Navajo language class and the government class, kind of started the Title VI program, kind of gave it a little bit more of a boost. But as you kind of went through your senior year, you found the creative side of you come out,
Yeah.
and kind of helped you put you on the path of what you're doing today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, really got my head on straight.
That's awesome. That's really cool, Aaron. Jacob, what was your experience?
It was different. I mean, I think it was good. It was a little different for me because coming from the reserve straight into the provost school district, it was a cultural shock like you would not believe. Like going from a reserve setting to a city setting, it's different, and there's a cultural barrier there that I kind of stumbled into, and even the native urban natives were a little different as well, and so it was just then you add the, the the church into there because Utah, the predominant religion is Mormon or Latter Day Saints. Sorry, Church of Jesus Christ Latter Day Saints. So it was interesting because I it was good that I learned how to read and write. That was really important. I learned mathematics. I learned how to do certain things. But kind of like what Aaron was saying is, with you, it's extremely clicky. There's clicks upon clicks in that school, and so it was really hard to kind of find community there. And so I think my father recognized that there was no strong community there at Timpview High School with the native community there. And again, this is like 16, 17 years ago. This is a long time ago, 18 years ago. This is not what it is today. So when I knock on that, I'm not knocking on what it is today. So it was not good back then. I'll be very honest. I was always made fun of for having long hair. I mean, within my religion at the time, I was always asked to cut my hair to pass sacrament or to become a priest or a deacon or a teacher, or I was always in fear of losing my hair. To me, my hair is the connection to my culture, my heritage, my history of my people, and so it was an interesting dynamic that I was going through as a young man to go through this. And so this is why I think Indigenous people are so resilient of what we go through as young people. Even our grandparents, they went to the residential school, and so I felt like I was going to residential school, but I wasn't. I wasn't. Going from a reserve where I could go into ceremony, I was sweating. I was going into Sundance. I was going to powwows, round dances, going from that to this, where it was like almost banned. We couldn't really do that there, and to share that area. So it was hard, but I think it makes that resilience, the practicing of resilience, of overcoming something, landing on your feet. And so my experience was completely different from Aaron's. And I'm sure that my experience was completely different from so-and-so's, So, again, I think if there's something that could be said or could be shared in a space, is creating more space like this for Indigenous people to share this with the Board of Educators or the governor, whoever who's listening, reading this, is create space for Indigenous voices, create a safe space for Indigenous young people to have that culture connectivity at school, where they enter the school, they need a place to smudge, they need a place to pray, they need a place to experience culture at this school. Like, I think Title VI, when I was in school, it was like Title IX, so this is years and years ago. But having a space where they can do that, and something as small as smudging, sweetgrass, cedar, sage, whatever that may be, the practice of doing that, you're forming that connectivity to the culture. And when Indigenous young people are connected to their culture, they're going to do better in school. And so that's just my take on that. I hope I answered some questions.
No, and like I shared, with my background. I mean, you're spot on, Jacob and Aaron, both of you. I've heard the same thing over and over and over again from thousands of Native American youth across the country, and that includes our First Nations up in Canada. Because I had the opportunity of working with reserves up in Canada as well. And that's the common theme is, the culture, um, the history of what we've had to deal and go through and experience as indigenous people. It seems like we've always been forced to not practice our culture or not respect our culture or not love our culture. It's always been you need to push it away, get away from it, learn a different culture, and I think that has definitely has caused some harm within our native communities. But at the same time, both of you mentioned the word resiliency, and I think as native people, we have I think become stronger. I shared with you this morning. I mean, right now, they're having a huge Native American summit in Washington. And so I was able to listen to some of the conversations and to hear the amazing strength of our Native people. And we're talking young people too. I mean, we're talking lawyers. And these are folks that are in their 30s. And, just hearing their words and just how powerful their words definitely warms my heart and gives me hope for our future as Native people that, our tribal communities are getting stronger. Our people are getting stronger, and that's what's amazing. And that's, I guess, why Meredith and I do the work that we do. Is we want to empower our Native youth to understand that you don't have to push your culture aside. That you should celebrate it, and it should be a part of your everyday life. And so I thank you, Jacob. Those words you shared are very wise. So let's talk about in general now. Aaron, I know you're probably definitely a little bit older, but maybe some of your younger siblings or some of the things that you've seen. I mean, there's a lot of challenges that young people go through, especially our Native people, and we've just talked a little bit briefly about some of those challenges. Um, what can you share? Let's say those that are watching that maybe are Native youth. What advice would you give them to help them navigate these times? I mean, it can be challenging going to school in an urban setting like our school district here in Provo. I mean, we're quite a ways, especially those who are Navajo. I mean, we're 8 hours away, 6 hours away from our homeland. So that's quite a distance. And so, what kind of advice can you give them to help them understand life, to kind of help them get through some of those difficult challenges? I mean, culture is a big part of that. What do you have any words that you may want to share with them? Some advice.
Yeah. I want, because you think about our ancestors and as just as people, I think we come from a long line of really determined and strong individuals. And I think that we as Native people have to have that same drive as our ancestors. I know when I was a senior, I was talking with the academic advisor at the school, and I was talking with her about how I wanted to go to BYU and how that's kind of just been the plan, like since I was a child, and that just for a lot of the benefits, especially with it being a lot cheaper than other universities. And so I said, like, this is the plan. Like, there's no, like, I'm not going anywhere. This has been the plan, and this is what I'm going to do. And so she like looked at my thing. She looked at a whole bunch of other things, and she's like, let's have an alternate plan because I don't think you're gonna get in. And then I was like, okay, well, and for me, I was like, well, I just told you, like, that's what's gonna happen. And so for me, I was like, I was like, for me, I was like, you know what? I'm going to show her, like, I'm going to apply. I'm going to do the best that I can in my sending in my application. And then I'm going to prove her wrong. I want to get into this school. I'm going to earn my way and I'm going to do it. And so for me, like, that's kind of been the narrative. And like, my experience has not been easy, but I think about like my grandparents. I think about how, like my grandma, she has like a very basic schooling background in education. She wasn't able to finish high school, but I see her resilience, I see her strength and her determination, and I feel that. And I, whenever I get scared or whenever I there was one I just recently, because I was just doing it kind of like a joke, and I was like, Grandma, I didn't do well, and she's like, don't talk that, don't put those words out into the universe. And she knew I was like joking, but she's like, don't do that. Like, you can do whatever you set your mind to. You just have to put in the work. And then if you don't get it the first time, you try again. And so that's kind of how I've I've been raised and I've been taught that. And then it's just you just gotta go with the flow. Life is hard, but also life is really joy, is filled with joy and happiness and laughter. And so kind of knowing and knowing to, when you're kind of coming up a hardship, just knowing that there's gonna be happy moments after that. And it's still like I still know after a hard day, the next day has the potential to be even better. And I think just having that skill of determination and being able to have that drive has really led me to overcome a lot of those challenges that I've had. And I know I'm gonna have to fall back on that for the future challenges that come. And I think that once I kind of embraced and knew that challenges were going to come, I was more prepared for them, and being able to kind of overcome them that way.
So do you think that by understanding those teachings really kind of gave you a strong foundation to help you kind of get through some of those difficult times, but now as who you are as a Native woman,
Mm-hmm.
that the teachings of your grandmother, the example of your grandmother, your mom, all of those things kind of all come together to kind of help you navigate things through life. Um, how important is that to you? As you keep getting older and older, what is that something you that's important for you to rely on is just kind of remembering those teachings and and listening to your elders.
Yeah. I'm in a field that is predominantly white and male. Journalism has a lot of, there's not too many minority people, I guess. And so I'm like getting my schooling at Brigham Young University, I had a lot of challenges, which were actually turned out to be great because it really led me to know where I wanted to go as a writer, because I knew that I wanted to work for a Native um, newspaper or organization, and I didn't want to work for like a mainstream because I wanted to write Native narratives that could then potentially be in mainstream, but I didn't want to do mainstream and then have to fight tooth and nail to write about Native stories. And so that's definitely been where how I do a lot of things, and I've had to sadly deal with a lot of like just sexism with some of the people who I'm trying to get interviews with and working with people, and then just having to go back and be like, no, like I'm a professional. I know what I'm doing, so let's kind of come up with a solution and being able to kind of work as professionals instead of you having to kind of belittle me. So it's definitely, I think it's definitely been really an impactful part of my journey, is being able to really embody that and being like, no, this is what I'm worth. This is how I'm going to get there, and I'm going to work towards it.
So that sounds great. Hey, thanks, Aaron, for sharing that. So Jacob, so I'm going to kind of ask you a little bit different since you're a little bit older. You have you're a dad yourself. Um, so what? First of all, again, what advice do you have to help to kind of help that Native youth kind of navigate the challenges that we have here, being maybe distance whatever home or reservation that our students are from. But as a dad, how are you teaching your child kind of both worlds? I mean, you know, it was interesting growing up. Myself. I wasn't raised on the reservation, so I'm a lot like living off the reservation for a big part of my life. I think throughout my all my years of 55 years on this earth, I think I probably have lived on the reservation 3 years. And so the rest of the time I lived off. But my parents really kind of gave me a good foundation of both worlds. And so how do you help your child kind of navigate the going through this time in life, and but at the same time strengthen that foundation, and again, what kind of advice do you have for those youth that might be struggling a little bit with their identity?
That's a good question, Brian. I would just say to introduce culture as early as you can to the child. My son, he's 16 years old, and so I kind of do it in doses. You're going to come sweat with me this summer. You're going to come hunt with me in the winter time. You're going to come powwow. You're going to experience that, and then have those reinforcements like the Title Six, because he lives in such a far away rural community away from Title Six programming. It's a little bit more challenging, but because of the internet, it kind of makes cultural classes and everything like that come right to you. But again, it's still a little different because you don't have that connectivity to the community, right? Face to face community, that is. I mean, they'll have a nice digital, and so it's really just introducing those culture components, doses, so that he doesn't get turned off, like, oh, you're overdoing it, overbearing, you're burning me out. I have to focus on my education. So I think it's just doing it in doses. And then for young people, I would just say, find your community, find that culture, and start utilizing the tools that are there for you. Like when I was younger, we didn't really have Facebook. I mean, we had it. If we had it, it was so new that nobody really even knew about it. I didn't really get involved in Facebook until I was out of high school. I was, 18, 19 years old, and I still didn't use it until I was like 23, 24, So I would just say, like every single Native organization's page from here to DC, from south of the border all the way up to Alaska, like every single organization's page, so that you can start seeing the opportunities that you guys have that we didn't have. We had to go look for that, or somebody would have to find us and be like, I want you to go do this. But nowadays you have it at the scroll of your phone. And so find the opportunities that you like, go after them fearlessly, so that you don't get hurt when people say no to you, or, because you're going to be a warrior, you're going to stand your ground, you're going to keep going after it. You will get in. It may take you some time, but you will get in. Or maybe the creator has another journey for you. That's why I say, like all those pages, because when one door closes, another one opens. And now there's so many opportunities out there for Indigenous young people that, okay, that door closed, try again, it closed, okay, move on. You will get in and then go back. And maybe you'll get in that next time by going into this door. For those that don't know, I was just at the UNFCCC, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, COP26, Conference of the Parties, 26th year, where all the world leaders get together and they talk about climate change and how they're going to reduce their emissions. The big United Nations conference. I got in. It took me 10 years to get to the UN. Don't give up. Keep trying. You'll get there. You just have to keep trying.
Yeah.
So that's my word of advice. Community, culture, love your culture fearlessly, and network and get involved with those Native organizations. That's what they're there for. They're there to lift you up. We've all kind of done the whole trailblaze thing. All you young people, the door is wide open. Just come on in. We need more people at the United Nations. We need more people within these organizations. That's what we need right now. We're in our renaissance as Indigenous people. We're going to be in our renaissance for the next 100 years. So now's the time. No child left behind. Let's go.
Yeah.
Together.
That's some great advice, Jacob. I mean, like you mentioned, I like the advice. Don't give up. Don't quit.
Yeah.
One door may close, but another door opens. And I've seen that many times with our native tribes. I mean, I spent quite a few years on the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian community, and I remember when I first started working out there in the '90s, mid '90s. It was pretty rough. Lot of gangs. The high school dropout rate was extremely high. Graduation rate was low. It was a community that was really really struggling, but the whole time as we were out there, what I saw was a community come together. My program with the Boys and Girls Club, the education department, the tribal council, just a lot of different groups begin to work together. And I think that's what's important is coming together as Native people, working towards, a goal. And now today it's night and day. I mean, it's a very business minded community. A lot of enterprises are taking place. A lot of partnerships. You mentioned partnerships. Their graduation rate, went from a low 20 percentile up to almost 70%. It's just an amazing turnaround that this community did coming together. But what's amazing is I'm seeing the resiliency of the youth during that time period grow, and many of those youth now are now leaders of that community, and to see them thrive and to see that passion you were talking about, that no quit attitude, come to life. That's what's amazing to see is just the hope now of Indian country. And you're right. That's what I'm seeing now is our native communities beginning to thrive. It's not kind of that depressed state anymore. I feel hope throughout Indian country, and I guess a lot of that is just seeing that hope come through our native youth. So with all of what we've been talking about tonight, now we have a lot of different folks that are watching, and many of them are not Native American. So my question to both of you, is how can non-Indigenous people become better allies to our Indigenous communities? Like, a school district like Provo School District. What could we do, in your opinion, that we could serve our Native youth better, or including all of our students of color? What can we do? And how can a non-Native be more involved in becoming a stronger ally? Any advice that you want to give to folks? I mean, you've lived here in Provo. You both went to BYU, so you know that there's a lot of good people here that do care. But what advice do you have that you can kind of help them to better understand? Maybe some of the challenges, some of the different things that you kind of went through as you were growing up. How can they be more involved in helping other Native youth today? Aaron, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, I have a lot of thoughts about that. So in second grade, oh gosh, I'm so embarrassed. Okay. So in second grade, they were doing the Thanksgiving play, I guess you could say, where they assign kids to dress up as pilgrims, and then other students dressed up as Indians, and then you reenacted the story of Thanksgiving, and then we have this huge, and there's a Thanksgiving dinner and stuff. Anyway, I was assigned to be an Indian, and everything was happening. I ended up getting chicken pox, and so people, they were like kind of doing their own thing, and they're like, okay, just whenever you're ready and you're feeling better, we have everything for you. You can just like be a bystander. So then I show up and I'm like, okay, like what's going on? And I'm like, oh, this is so cool. We're gonna have a Thanksgiving dinner and we're gonna have turkey and all this stuff. And then they're like, okay, you can just stand there as an Indian. And I was like, okay, what does that mean? And then I'm like, okay. And so then they come with me and they give me like a brown paper sack with like these Indian symbols on it. And then they're like, okay, so now you're just going to stand here. And then they had like a headband, like a yarn headband and stuff like that. And then I was just like, okay, because I was like, well, this is what my teachers are telling me. And I'm like, all right, well, I guess this is what is happening. But then my parents were like, they were like flabbergasted. They're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe we're like watching our child dress up as an Indian and have all these other kids dressing up as Indians and pilgrims. And they were just like, oh my goodness. And they're like thinking, what? Like, where did we go wrong? Like, and then after that, they like contacted like our teachers and things like, and then after that, like my parents like sometime around Thanksgiving, the month of November, they would always make time to come in and do like a cultural presentation for my sister and my classes. And like that just kind of became like the norm. And it was always really fun. It was always, they'd always have like some kind of like fry bread or do some kind of activity at the end. And we were always like, that was always like such a fun thing to look forward to. So my tips for that is, one, don't do a Thanksgiving parade like that. There's so many things. There's so many better ways to bring Native voices and there's so many other activities that can help the classroom learn as a whole instead of just grabbing things here and there and then just making something up. I would say reach out to. There's so many resources. There's so many people that are wanting to help educate and bring people's to bring actual like experienced stories and histories. But I think as far as bringing in like just people of color, indigenous voices, I think especially during history and just like in general, I think bringing in a lot of different views about a certain topic is really important, because a lot of history is just from one perspective in like the generic history books. But I would really love, and that's what I loved about my history classes, my American Indian Studies classes at BYU, was that we brought in a whole bunch, and sociology, we brought in a whole bunch of different perspectives for one thing that I learned in high school. And it was like, oh my goodness, there's this perspective. The Civil War wasn't just about the North and South. It involved so many people. And I think that there's a big focus, and it's just easy to fall into like, okay, like Civil War, for example, it's just North and South, no one else is involved. But there's so many people that were impacted that I think that a lot of people don't teach that. And I think just finding those experiences is really important, and just kind of involving them into class instead of, okay, we're only going to learn about Native people only the month of November. And then after that, we're going to just forget about them and then go on till the next year. Like, no, like let's talk about it all year round. I was in my second grade class, but I remember like at the end of school, before we got out, the teacher would have us all, like, she'd turn music on, and then she would like say, okay, well, we're going to so like for one student, they were from, they're Polynesian, so we're talking about, then we learned a little bit about like the Samoan Islands or something like that. And then they're like, okay, now it's like Aaron, and just like close your eyes. And then she would bring up like, hey, we're gonna like imagine like this kind of like the sand paintings, and we're gonna imagine the Monument Valley, and we're gonna be like all kinds of things like that. And even though I had a bad like that experience in second grade with the Pilgrims and Indians, but she was able to bring out like a lot of other students' background perspectives. And so we're all able to learn about each other. And it wasn't like, okay, you're this, you're that. It was just like, let's learn about these people. And so I think when you involve a lot of these topics in just everyday normal setting, I think that it becomes more normal, and it becomes more about, okay, like let's learn about the event and like all these voices, instead of saying, okay, we're gonna only learn about natives today, and then after that we're just gonna like talk about and something else. I think it's really important to incorporate it in all topics, in all things, instead of just one page of Native Americans that are about 500 years ago.
That's great advice, Aaron. And I totally agree that, culture shouldn't really be celebrated just because it's that particular month. Culture needs to be celebrated every day, and all cultures need to be celebrated and recognized daily. And yes, I totally agree. Thank you for sharing that. I'm amazed that that you still remember that. And I'm thinking here as I'm listening to you, how much of an impression that made at second grade, and you can remember that. That it really had an effect on you. As you were kind of explaining the detail that it had a profound effect on you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, maybe in some ways a little bit of, you can say the word trauma in some
Yeah.
cases, because I remember an experience that I had when I was almost 5 years old. My parents were going to school here at BYU as well, and I experienced my first taste of racism. And I remember that individual that said some pretty terrible things to me, to a 4.5-year old. I remember what that individual looks like today,
Mm-hmm.
over 50 years ago. And so trauma is a big part of that. And I think sometimes we don't think that, those little things like a play, how much damage that can cause or how much harm that can cause. So we definitely need to be very careful and how we do that. So thank you for sharing that. Jacob, what do you have? Do you have any thoughts on that particular question?
Yeah, I think just, I like what I'm hearing about, like, culture or Native American Heritage Month shouldn't be the only time where we talk about the history of Native Americans. I think really diving into the curriculum and making sure that we're talking about what happened to the indigenous people of North America every day in our history classes, or at least in those sections, so that, it's not just the month of November where this is where we're going to celebrate the indigenous people. Like, we have to really, revamp those history lessons for the general public, so that they understand what happened. The truth and reconciliation, and that's what's part of truth and reconciliation, is having those conversations within those classes. And so I would suggest, maybe, once a month, once every 2 months, have somebody come in and talk about truth and reconciliation with your students, as well as create safe places where students can come into the school and participate in a smudge, a cultural experience every single day, so that they're grounded and they're connected and they start their day out in a good way. And maybe before they go home, they're able to cleanse themselves of what they just experienced. And sometimes that could be trauma, that could be bullying, that could be, what at racism. I hope to gosh it's not, but a safe place where they can cleanse themselves, so that when they go home, they leave that there. And so I think creating spaces for kids to really experience that culture. And who knows, that may even be the only time they experience culture is at school, which in my opinion is very sad.
Yeah.
But we have to make sure that we're protecting the next generation, and that we promote and we create those spaces where there is culture connectivity for our students. So that's something I'm going to say right there. Something else is just continue creating dialogue, creating safe spaces like we're doing right now, where there's leadership watching us, I don't want to say probing us, but watching us and, listening to our words, and that they're continuing to make spaces like this where Indigenous people can feel safe to share their knowledge, because a lot of times people will extract Indigenous knowledge and they'll coin it as something else, and then all of a sudden they'll go with it. I don't like talking on panels like this all the time, just because I'm aware of what's happening to our people. Is it's getting extracted. A lot of knowledge is getting extracted. It's getting pulled. It's getting tested and processed, and we're always trying to quantifiable and all that other stuff. We're always trying to do that. So I would really, be aware of that, and to create these safe places where that's not going to happen, I would hope. But that's all I can really say about that. Brian, thank you.
No, thank you, Jacob. Both of you, thank you so much. Can't believe that hour has flown by that quick. And I think we could probably go another hour. But so, kind of ending this evening, like I said, I want to thank both of you. I mean, you definitely, I've learned a lot. I mean, you've taught me some valuable things that I'm going to apply in my life, and as well as what I do here in my position here at Provo, here in the Provo City School District. And so I thank you. I mean, I think your words of wisdom is definitely something that we can definitely do here in our district to make it more inclusive. So as we end this evening, so Aaron, this is kind of your last moment. Do you have any final thoughts that you might want to share with everybody here that's listening?
My last and final thought is find resources to help you find your balance. I think that surrounding yourself with really good and uplifting and encouraging people is always really important. I think that we're in a world where knowledge is very attainable, but then also there's also to know when and how much to share is also important. And I also would encourage everyone to learn and to try and ask sometimes hard questions for your grandparents and your parents, because a lot of times they've gone through so much in their life. And I think for me, sometimes it was hard to ask those questions, but there were times where I did, and I was like, oh my goodness, like I would have never known this, or we're trying to figure out like a couple of stories and trying to line them up and stuff. And I'm just like, wow, like this is something I've always wondered, but I never asked. And I think that just asking those hard questions is important. And I think just seeking as much as you can about who you are as a Native person is really important. And then if you have the energy and the resources and the knowledge to also share with other people would be also important, because we are pretty low in numbers, but we have so much might, and we have so much to give and to also help uplift and strengthen our communities. So
thank you, Aaron. That's beautiful. Jacob, any thoughts?
Yeah. Learn, love, experience, practice your culture. You young people, love your culture, love who you are. I cannot say this enough. Culture has opened so far many doors than my education ever did. I'm just going to say that out loud. Learn your culture, love your culture, experience it, practice it, hug it. It's there to help you. Your ancestors died for that. Honor them by learning it and practicing it, speaking it. Do what you can to stay connected as much as you can. Take it in small doses if you can, but if you can experience a lot of it, try to do that. It'll open so many doors for you later on in life, and I can testify to that today. I just went to the UNFCCC conference in Glasgow, Scotland. The whole reason why I went there was my Indigenous knowledge. Had nothing to do with the westernized knowledge that I had learned. So love that culture. That's it.
All right. Thank you so much, Jacob. Aaron, Jacob, thank you for joining us this evening. Again, this has been a wonderful, wonderful night. And to everybody joining us this evening. This is the second speaker series that we've had. We'll have 4 more next semester, and so we hope that you'll take the time to join us again. And so I thank you for being with us this evening. So Meredith, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Brian, for everybody who came this evening. I'm not going to cry. Not going to do it. One really interesting thing, I think Brian can attest to this too, is there's no greater joy being a parent, being an older adult. I don't think I'm quite elder age, maybe auntie, but not quite elder. But there is a time where you just look at people in awe and you're just so proud of them. One statistic for the people who are watching who don't know this, 78% of Native Americans live in urban areas. We may be small in numbers, like Aaron said. And one hard truth, I think, for me was going to college and being in a sea of people that were not like me, attending classes and hearing viewpoints that were not, not very representative of who I was. And learning and delving into the history, I realized at some point there was a moment of disenchantment where I realized, oh my goodness, the US American system was not set up for Native American people to succeed. The US educational system was used as a weapon to keep Native Americans obsolete. And I don't think people knew that Native Americans were going to live as long as they did. And so forced assimilation policies were hopeful policies to eradicate and keep Native Americans out of succeeding. But from that, there was so much disheartening realization, I think, for me, when I realized, wow, okay, this system was set up for me to fail. But I think I'm a little stubborn, maybe a little bit like you, Aaron. You're a little more humble, though, where I felt like, you know what? I'm not going to leave, and I'm not going to let this bring me down. And I remember just having that moment where I was like, you know what? I'm not going to be able to tell my kids, if I have kids, that I gave up. I need to get through this. I need to show them that I can do this. And I stuck through it. And if there's anything that describes Native American people, I would definitely say their resiliency. And we are strong. We may be few in number, but we are strong people. And there is so much, and I think this is why there's such a renaissance right now and a bright light shown on Native American and Indigenous communities, is because we've gone through so much in history that we've also endured a lot, but we've also been able to remain strong and to keep the stories and the cultures, and that is incredible. It's incredible. Miracle, that we've been able to remain as strong as we have been. And so a lot of times I will, have this conversation with my kids. I will tell them, you are in a system that wasn't designed for you to succeed, but failure is in the eye of the beholder. And you will always be a winner in the Native community, because there are things that are really important to us as a community. Family, community, those are the things that define success for us. And once we have those things, we're not failures. We will succeed. Just like Jacob said, when we hold to our culture, miracles can happen. Wonderful things can happen. And so don't let it get you down. For those students that are listening, for the youth that are out there, I know there were times where our ancestors probably wanted to give up. but they stuck in because maybe they could see us now. Maybe they had visions of who we would become. And so if I can give a message this evening, it would be to not give up. Remember, you come from a very resilient background, and you are indigenous to this land. You are blood born from this land, and you have ties to it. And that brings so much strength. Your ancestors are buried in this land, and we have such amazing ties. And so remember that. And remember that maybe from a failure can come a success. From failure can come beautiful experiences. And just because maybe you failed doesn't mean that you failed in life. You still have so many wonderful opportunities. And so remember where you come from. And so that would be my message. And I have learned that and have seen that over and over with students that I've worked with. And it's just been an honor to see them go on and do amazing things and become these like YouTube stars and TikTok stars. And they have these amazing platforms where they are amplifying Native American voices, where they are speaking for people who can't speak for themselves. And I think there is nothing better. And it makes me so proud to see that happening. And I just am so grateful for you guys to be here this evening to share your wisdom and your knowledge. So thank you. And have a good night, everybody.